session for the day entitled Thriving in the New Normal. The final session will be paneled by Kathleen Smith, CFI, Vice President of Asset Protection at Albertsons Safeway, Joe Conway, Director of Asset Protection at Acme Markets, Marcus Young, Director of Asset Protection at United Supermarkets, and Ryan Clevenger, Director of Asset Protection at Albertsons Safeway.
We're so excited to have an esteemed panel. You've already heard all of their names and titles, but we're throwing a little fantastic little sidebar in because this is the last session before happy hour. So we hope all our audience has a cocktail because we're going to play the virtual call, mute, unmute. If you guys start talking and you're on mute, everyone in the audience has to drink. Does that sound good?
I gotta find my mute button.
They're shaking their head. They're not.
Well, sounds good.
I'm looking for my mute button. So I can play too.
Yeah. So everybody get ready to play out there. But we do want to bring you some pretty valuable content here. So we do thank our panelists for their time. So we're going to jump right in. Kathleen, with you. So talking about dealing with this global pandemic and also being prepared for what could possibly be coming next, whether that's social unrest, a second wave. From a C-suite perspective, how do you describe what your team has gone through, and then also how you prepare them for what's next? So from shifting to regular loss prevention roles to what they then had to deal with the global pandemic.
Well, from my perspective, and I'm actually very fortunate because I have a great group of people out there, but we're always have been the first responder in any type of a crisis. So with the pandemic, although it started off a bit slowly, we were on the front lines to begin with. And I can remember early on having the divisions deal with law enforcement, and would they respond if someone was wearing a mask or not masked, or what somebody alleged to have COVID-19. So I could very easily communicate with our C-suite that this is in our wheelhouse. We are very good at doing this, and we're very good at responding quickly and changing that direction if we have to. So with us, the way it started, it was at divisional level, and then with each new opportunity, we could ramp up. We never left it. They stayed at it all the time and then continually added to what they were already doing. And I could relay that back to the C-suite. I tried to be their communication to the C-suite. So not everyone was calling the division, asking them what was going on, because they were boots on the ground. They're the ones that are doing it, dealing with it day in and day out.
So that means really it's all skills that you already have in the toolbox, but also kind of ramped up, right? So kind of turning to you guys and from a team perspective, what was that like to have all of your existing duties, right? Plus dealing with global pandemic, all of these other things. I mean, is it just stretched to the max, or how did you deal with your own internal team from a communication perspective and other things? Brian?
Yeah, I think the most important thing was just prioritization. Everybody, if you flash back 6 months ago, everybody would swear this was the busiest time they've ever had. And then COVID shows up, and then it becomes the new busy. Then we throw in social unrest, and then it becomes the new busy. So it wasn't that we're stretched to the max. I think no matter where we're at within asset protection, we're always busy. But it's what are we going to do to prioritize the most important factors we're dealing with on a day in and day out basis. So Kathleen was great on giving the information from corporate expectations, what we needed to do, and support wise for us at the division so that we could react accordingly. But for us here in Seattle in my division, just the prioritization of what is today's biggest issue and what's this week's biggest issue, and prioritization so that we could adapt, because no matter how busy you are, you can never get everything done. You just got to pick what, with your team and your resources and infrastructure, what are you going to tackle and what's going to be the biggest priority?
So Kathleen, you've talked a little bit about how sometimes corporate can get in the way, right? When you've got great people in the field, how did you manage the communication perspective of saying, look, I'm going to try to help shield some of my team from the communication pieces? Like, how did that work, especially because you have such a spread out team across the country?
Well, we did have a crisis team set up in our corporate headquarters. So if they wanted something from at a division level, they came through me. I tried to then keep that at a minimum, although I did have to, request information periodically. And we had a call. Our team had a call with all the directors at least once a week. The other thing that I could do, and I will say this from senior leadership, is the sharing of information from other retailers. So whether it be RELA, whether it be the Restaurant Association, your group, Amber, whether it be FMI, I could find out what the other companies were doing and translate that to the corporate. That saved our people time, I think, and was beneficial. One of my biggest learning through this whole thing has been the importance of making contacts in other retail establishments and sharing vital information.
Yeah, what about you guys from kind of the local level, knowing that for your local, it's pretty large, but thinking about, is there certain things that you guys think, hey, I was really glad that we could reach out to so-and-so locally, or even a peer within your team to start, sharing information and kind of going over different things like what you're seeing in the stores. Joe?
Yeah, really well said and framed out by Ryan and Kathleen. But I think that as this thing evolved over time, we realized that the relationships that we had were so important. The relationships that we developed prior to all of this became so important and so critical, from IT to developing technologies to manage through this, to the industry groups like your group, Amber, PFMA, New Jersey Food Council. All of those groups became invaluable in centralizing and getting clean information to our leadership in our stores so that we could pivot the right way, as there was a lot of pivoting over the last 3-4 months, right? So all of those relationships, all the way to internally with our marketing group, with our IT group, as we rolled out new operating procedures in the stores from our cleaning and food safety group, they all sort of really, I think probably more so than any other crisis before, really the threads of each contributor wove together well in putting together the fabric and handling this crisis. It's really been the post-op, or as we look back, even though we're still navigating through it, looking back, I think it's been the relationships that have been the differentiators for us.
Ryan?
Joe, you're spot on. I mean, you don't think it's an accident how fast the grocery and retail industry moved and was able to adapt to this situation. I mean, it was day in, day out. We were able to move, whether it be the plastic screens or how are you dealing with pin pads or security or different things. That wasn't an accident. That wasn't each individual retailer working on it themselves and trying to diagnose and fix the solution. We were on the phones with all of our partners, all of the relationships. As everybody knows, in asset protection, we're always that one group that we kind of knock down the walls between retailers. And the first thing we do is reach out to our resources and the partners out there. So, the first thing obviously was Seattle. We were the hot spot, which we'll talk about here shortly. I had countless phone calls coming in to the point where it was getting a little bit much, and we were able to, talk about, what we're doing and how we're reacting, and some of the great ideas that we were able to move with were, hey, try this, do this. We're getting ready to do this. So the partnerships, Joe, spot on. It was if it wasn't for that seamless communication and partnership networks already in place prior to the crisis, I think a lot of this would go a lot differently.
Even your networking with law enforcement. But I would tell you, Ryan, that I'll bet you Joe thinks he was a hot spot too, not just Seattle.
Lots of hot spots for sure. So if you're counting of the takeaways, maybe we should do a drink every time you can do a takeaway, because that's definitely one. Is if you're waiting to start those relationships, don't wait any longer. You have to have industry relationships, local relationships, networking with retailers. That sounds like a good one. So moving toward more traditional kind of loss prevention structure, Joe. So looking at what types of theft that you guys were encountering, whether was it new, was it more, was it just increased? Like, what did you see as a result of the pandemic and even after that, the social unrest? But so talk to us a little bit from your perspective of the more traditional internal, external theft pieces. You're on mute. That's for our audience benefit.
You know what? I kind of felt like everybody needed a drink.
Yeah.
So now from it was, in looking at it, how it evolved and where it continues to evolve was really kind of interesting. From an external standpoint, we sort of broke it in looking back into sort of three distinct zones or phases, right? And the first one was volume equals distraction equals opportunists, for us anyway. And it was pretty stark and pretty fast. And I will tell you that, we deploy our vendor partner tools surgically for me in my area. So I have Gatekeeper and Cartronics and PureCheck anti-rollout systems in a lot of my stores. And I will tell you that when this first started, all of the distraction that came along with the unprecedented volume that we navigated through in March, April, and into May, and it continues. Those systems told the story that otherwise would not have been told. I mean, people were seeing it and people were identifying it, but more so, people were distracted. So those technologies, the Gatekeeper, Cartronics, and Checkpoint for us, really sort of earmarked and identified a growing problem that we were able to sort of socialize to other stores. We knew it was happening in those stores, so we were able to ripple effect address it from there on in. And it also told the story of how important front-end oversight is, because I have to say, both internally and externally, there's a tactical end of front-end oversight, and then there's a sort of a more oversight end of oversight in watching and observing and reacting to what's going on. We were in all tactical, right? Everybody who was at the front end, we're helping those registers run, we're taking polls, we're making sure the people, the money, the distancing, all of those things were safe. And in doing so, you just inherently give up some of that oversight that's so important on the day-to-day operations. And thankfully, because of our team, we're very lucky. We're able to reel that in very, very quickly. And then sort of moved into the third phase, which came with occupancy limitations and social distancing at the registers, every other POS for us. And once we bottlenecked our front ends and stationed somebody at the front end to manage occupancy levels, those pushouts and that external pressure really did fall off significantly. So it's kind of where we stand right now, even though we're transitioning to electronic occupancy controls in areas that we're able to. And that's a very localized, mandated technological solution. Some areas say you don't have to have any occupancy limitations. Others say you do, but you can manage it through IT. And others say you need occupancy limitations, and that has to be managed by a human. So it's sort of a mixed bag that we're still navigating to. Most land on the technological side, so we have technology deployed at our entrances to maintain occupancy levels, and when it gets to a critical point, it alerts our store leadership that they put a person up there to start sort of choking the occupancy and managing it closely until it's let up.
And I'll just say jump in here real quickly. Our challenge is it a statewide mandate? Is it a county mandate? Is it a city mandate? And is it recommended or is it required? And does it go on what the fire code is or an arbitrary number? And I think that's a good takeaway for me after this is done, to see if we can, from our senior management level, get some consistency across the country in what to do in this type of in these types of situations. I think it's unprecedented that usually we'd have a crisis in a small area, and this is across the entire country and worldwide, and we don't have a consistent direction on what to do.
Yeah, Ryan?
My 2 cents.
One thing that Joe he mentioned, the word opportunist. That was one thing that really jumps to mind when it comes to not only the COVID aspect of this, but also the social unrest. We all have a lot of technology and solutions put in place, whether it be gatekeeper and the anti-pushout prevention. But I think one thing it did is it really exposed and showed the areas where your technologies and solutions are effective. And then also the areas where you probably could touch up and add similar solutions or maybe button up a little bit more. So, I think again, like Joe out in Seattle, we've got gatekeeper all over the place, and it identified that it was a great investment, and it prevented a lot of that. And then when we had some stores that didn't have that technology, we had the individuals doing the persons counting at the front, monitoring the front, and that they identified a lot of the push outs and a lot of the external opportunities popping up. So again, the opportunists really did, you don't know what you don't know. It really showed and highlighted the areas where we have effective solutions and then some areas where we need to probably tighten up a little bit more.
So let me talk a little bit about the internal part of this. I've heard from several grocers when they're talking about dealing with such mass volume that you guys typically see, Super Bowl, holidays, right? To where you're hiring people so quickly. Did that lead to a increase in your normal internal activity? And with everything else that you have going on, how did you handle that, Joe?
Yeah, so that was an interesting take. There's some interesting takeaways there as well. So as we navigated into this with the increase in volume, just like our external story, our internal activity fell off a cliff. I mean, it went down to really next to nothing as we navigated all of the other things that were brought to the table with this crisis and all of the things that sort of evolved as this crisis went on into May, into June, and now into July. Right around early April, we saw a sharp increase in the desperate need for more help, more employees. From our banner standpoint, we hired over 4,000. We're a small banner, 165 stores. We hired well over 4,000 individuals in a matter of 8 to 10 weeks. So it was sort of, they say, being fed by a fire hose. It was a higher hose. I mean, we were just really onboarding people as quickly as we humanly possibly could. And there are consequences with that because you can't hire that many people in the midst of that kind of volume without cutting corners. And I think after a number of weeks into that sort of experiment or that exercise of onboarding so many people, we saw a slow increase in internal activity. And the commonalities of the internal activity was very low dollar amount, early on in their tenure with our company, and just really kind of knucklehead decision making. Clearly they were going to get caught. They weren't even, they had no idea of the capabilities that we had to track and look into and investigate a lot of this stuff. So we quickly pivoted and ramped up our awareness. And what we found through a lot of the internal investigations and interviews that we did was that there was a significant amount of people that were bitter. that came to work to us because they had to. They were laid off and they had to. There was no stimulus yet. And they were getting a job because they had to. They had no investment in our company. They were going to, in many instances, they were going to leave as soon as they possibly could, whether it's get back to their old job or a new job or something different. And I think there was sort of there was a little bit of that that we navigated, and people making bad decisions. And then there was just people that were, again, getting back to Ryan's word, opportunists, right? People thinking that they could take advantage of a situation, not knowing all of the investigative and alert components that were behind it, taking cash out of a register and it coming up short. Failing to ring sales, and that being flagged by our exception reporting system, and those types of things. So there was a lot of shallow activity. We were able to tighten things up fairly quickly. And the takeaway, or the story to be told on how important our selection process, our interviewing process, right, our onboarding process, and our ongoing training process really is. I mean, it's invaluable on the role that plays in the success of our business moving forward. And I think that was a takeaway not only for us, but for our AR and HR department, our training department, and as well as our ops folks.
Yeah, and thinking about that, I know that this will probably be a question for everyone, because I'm hearing it a lot in the marketplace, especially as things change and evolve, and if we have to go back into a more mandated shutdown situation, is how are you dealing with teaching your employees about masks? And so now they're required, they're not required. Is the retailers, the grocer supposed to be policing this? Or your, people calling the police because someone's not wearing a mask, and it really puts your frontline employees in a pretty difficult position. So Kathleen, I'll go to you and just kind of talk about that for a minute, and then maybe to your team about what they're seeing at the local level.
So for our own employees, and I'll tell you, we did this early on. Globally, we provided masks for all our own employees. So our employees wearing masks has probably been an easy solution. With the customers and enforcing that, and that's again goes back to the legislative thing, is sometimes it's mandated, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's recommended, sometimes it's not. So we've had challenges this way. And I don't know what the final solution would be, but if we could have one best way, I can, because the communities are confused as what they're supposed to do. And when we listen or lighten up and stop wearing the mask, and then they decide to put them back on, we double our problems. And it's our customers that are frustrated, understandably.
Yeah. The back and forth of not knowing what the policy is. Ryan?
Right.
I think the big opportunity here is just making sure that all levels of the organization are aware of what the expectation was. That was probably the biggest challenge. So you can have your district manager, store director calls. You can have that to where your leadership is aware of what the current, expectation is today, because it changes every 5 minutes, whether it be a local city, you have some counties, you have, Washington, we have now the governor has mandated masks and is expecting all businesses to enforce that. So the biggest opportunity for us was just making sure that just not your leadership is aware, but that all of your frontline employees, your cashiers, your people on the sales floor, because they're the ones that are going to have to interact with these individuals on a day in and day out basis. And what is the expectation of those individuals, and how far do you want to take it? Do you really want to end up on social media being the next person tackling a customer to the ground or dragging them out by their bootstraps? You don't want to do that. And I think the opportunity is, in Seattle, 25 to 30,000 employees here, making sure that everybody's aware of what that expectation is, and then to what degree and how far do you take it? Because it's important that there has to be a sense of reasonableness here, where we're not law enforcement. We're here in the grocery industry to sell bread, milk, and eggs. And we're not going to ask a part-time cashier to enforce a local mandate. So at what point in time do you involve law enforcement? At what point in time do you just say, we as the business did enough that was reasonable that we can put on our shoulders, and you let the person walk through? You still deny service, but you don't want to escalate. You want to de-escalate. And really, so it's a very, very careful balancing act. But Joe said it earlier, awareness, employee awareness was huge, and really making sure that everybody's aware of the expectation. How do you address? And then if you do have a one-off, that's what we have resources like asset protection to contact us, and we'll work through each individual situation. And Washington State, we've had this mandate now for about 3 or 4 days now. It's been live for mask enforcement, and we've had some fun ones. So it's there's going to be the one-offs, but making sure that clear, concise communication is out there.
Marcus, how's it going over there in Texas?
Yeah, so I would agree. Ryan hit it head on. When he said what's reasonable to comply with the mandate, we're not law enforcement. And to his point, having a courtesy clerk or a cashier try to enforce the mask mandate is just unreasonable. So here at United, within Texas and New Mexico, our talking points were around, offer them a mask, something that we provide if they don't have one. And if they still don't comply, then we've done what's reasonable, right? And we've seen more public shaming between guest on guest than any other incidents between us and guests. Whether it's, altercations or just verbal assaults in the store.
Wow. Joe, did you have anything to add to that? You were on mute, off mute. There you go.
Yeah, no, it was, those guys framed it out perfectly. It's all about drawing clear boundaries for our folks and expectations. Where we missed that, we saw problems. Where we did a really good job at executing those boundaries, we didn't see many, if any, problems.
And I know we talk about conflict management, and de-escalation. And of course, there's some great training programs out there about de-escalation and providing your associate scripts and things like that. But Joe, from a conflict management perspective, I know you guys have a pretty interesting way you go about it. And this, we've lost track of takeaways. We've got so many so far, but tell us about your conflict management piece of it.
So Ryan framed it up well first, is we were going to be certain, our banner leadership, and quite frankly, Kathleen involved in that, we were not going to be the mask or social distancing police. But we had to make sure that we were maintaining, a calm level within our stores when people disagreed or did not want to follow the mandates, did not want to color within the lines of the mandates that were drawn either locally or at state level. And what we found is, in most instances where there was a conflict that escalated to a concerning level, where maybe law enforcement needed to be involved or additional employees needed to be involved, it became a tug of war. And most conflicts, we feel, are more or less a tug of war. And when we speak to our employees about it, we train them to what we call drop the rope. Because if you're in a tug of war, in a conflict, no matter the issue, if somebody just drops the rope and listens, more often than not, that will de-escalate a situation. It'll allow somebody to vent or talk themselves out, and then more measure or more reason can be found. The other thing that I think we found in the conflicts that we did manage through in our banner over the last 3, 4, 5 months is, you may be dealing with somebody who's yelling and screaming or wanting to engage with you about wearing a mask or not wearing a mask, about social distancing, or about product limitations, right? And what we found is, more often than not, it has nothing to do with those sort of shallow or surface issues. It has to do with that person got laid off 3 weeks ago and is not going to be able to make their car payment. They didn't get their stimulus check. Something else, we could go into a million different scenarios, is weighing on them. And this is sort of the this is sort of the final weight on the seesaw that tips it the other way. And they're using this to realize that and understand that more often than not, the conflicts that we're navigating in our stores go far beyond our stores, is a really, really strong negotiation point. When people realize that, they drop the rope easier, and they find resolution in a more measured, agreeable way. And it's the best outcome for everybody.
Yes,
And
teach.
even
Go ahead, Kathleen.
Even our own employees, we have to realize that they're dealing with this.
That's a good point.
And so that we need to make sure that, we could invite them to the bingo tonight, but that they have, they understand we appreciate everything they're doing continually, because they're dealing with the same thing both at the store and at home.
So it's that empathetic perspective, both internally to your employees, but also training your employees to be empathetic to your guests or customers, for sure. So let's turn our attention to technology. I know we've had a lot of discussions in preparation for this about what technologies are going to be good and what can help you quickly, right? Because I think, at least in my lifetime, this is the most unprecedented time of needing to get technology to the market very quickly. That's helping with the global pandemic, right? So Marcus, talk to us about the reason you decided to test thermographic technology at your DC and manufacturing plant.
Yeah, so we learned early on from watching the processing plants around us, what was happening there, that we needed an extra layer of protection around these two vital facilities. So we first deployed temperature scanners on stands where the team member would walk up, it would read their temperature, and then as long as they were under the threshold, they could enter the facility. But with the facility operating 400 to 500 people that work in shifts every single day, this wasn't efficient. And also the labor around having somebody there at that station to ensure compliance, that they were having their temperature scanned and they weren't over the temperature threshold. So we all realized quickly that if we could deploy a thermal detection system that worked behind the scenes, that was integrated into our access control and sent all the email and push notification and alerts if somebody did temp over, we could get rid of that high price labor there that was there for compliance reasons. And then we could also enter the facility almost like we did pre-COVID. So we at United, we feel that, tip checks will be or should be kind of the new expectation post-COVID at facilities like these.
Yeah, that's interesting because not only are you dealing with the health part about the temperatures, but you also have to, in your example here, talking about labor, things that you don't even know that you're going to have to merge, right? Taking the temperatures of a labor force that's changing over shifts, 300 to 500 people, as you said. So what are some of the lessons learned as you installed and tested the temperature detection system? Because I know this is a really hot topic for a lot of people, trying the stands like you guys did, to the cameras, to whether your facility's outside or inside. Like, how did it work, and the lessons that you've learned and are currently learning?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Amber. When we first started down this path, it was new to me. I had no knowledge or background in the use of this technology, so I was learning as I went. So the first thing I did was I set up webinars with some of the largest security companies here in the U.S. that all of you know and probably use. And I quickly realized after some of those webinars that it was new to them as well. And this was all coming out of the UK. And so they were learning as we went along. And so I did find that all of these major security companies, I thought this was very interesting, that they all adopted the same technology, right? Coming out of the UK, the same hardware, same software, but they branded it under their own unique name. And so each webinar I'd go to, they would show me the software, and it was the same software from the prior webinar. So I thought that was interesting. And it also gave me confidence that what I was looking at, what the U.S. thought was going to be the right solution for the industry. So one of the biggest lessons that we've learned so far early on in the 2 tests that we have running today is that the location and placement is probably the most critical part of the system working as designed, getting accurate temperature readings. Early on, some of their sales engineers and so forth said, hey, you can install it outside, it'll work just fine, or you can install it right inside the entry door, it'll work just fine. And so we've tried some of that, and we've learned that for the best optimal performance, you need to place it in an area in the building where the employee has time to acclimate to the inside temperature before having their temperature read. And one other important thing that I wanted to share is that we found that to increase the accuracy of the temperature readings to within 0.5 degrees Fahrenheit, that you really have to use the black body calibration unit with these systems. And really what that does, that keeps that thermal camera calibrated 100% of the time. So that's really what we've learned so far. And like I said, we're early on in the pilot test, but we should have the results back by the end of the month.
Yeah, definitely complicated technology that's not inexpensive, right? And I know a lot of people are you guys probably had the pressure from, the C-suite or anyone else kind of saying, hey, we need to figure this out and we need to figure it out now. So it's not even like you had a ton of time to test things out and really take your time with all of this happening at once. Ryan, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, with what Marcus described, spot on. It's the solutions out there on the thermal side. Obviously, it's everybody's running and gunning trying to get this stuff deployed. Again, the same solutions that we deployed, here in Seattle, in our manufacturing and distribution and all those areas. They were accurate. They're spot on. They were great to take out the low-hanging fruit and any obvious individuals. Everybody knew that the solution was in place, and if they felt like they had a temperature or anything, they weren't going to risk it and come to work. So it took that component out where people just didn't bother showing up. But the other piece is we, within our entire organization, no matter what division, we're very, very up on the technology savvy, and always like trying new items. Marcus, myself, Joe, we're always trying to find the latest and greatest. But we looked at this not as an end solution being the end all be all. This was just a complementary component to what we were doing to make sure the health screenings were accurate. Thermal solutions were just a technology piece to go through and get the obvious. And if somebody had a 102 temperature, they clearly have issues, they got to go home. But it was an additional component to the actual health screenings and the questions and the awareness to make sure, because as everybody's aware with COVID, not everybody's going to demonstrate the same symptoms. Some are going to be, they're not going to show any symptoms, but they're still going to be a carrier. So making sure that we have this as a highlighting component, as well as the health screenings, the questionnaires, the exposure, have you traveled? So it was just, we found that to be a very effective solution to make sure that we're using all of the obvious pieces with the technology, as well as the awareness with all the employees. So it has to be a well-rounded, solution to make sure the health screenings are not just focusing on technology only.
So talking about that a little bit from an employee perspective, did you guys partner with your HR team or any, other folks within your organization to kind of think about the employee side? I mean, is there anything that you would pass on to the audience to say, hey, you got to make sure that your employees, they know that you're taking your temperature, or you don't tell them, or you tell them that, right when they get into the building? Or how did that work, Marcus?
Yeah, so of course, we ran it by HR prior to installing the thermal camera. And one thing that we did, we just notified everybody at that facility, hey, this is what we're doing. This is kind of how it works, and really no issues.
Kathleen, or Joe, go ahead.
I think an important and easily overlooked component of that was I think our company did a really good job from jump, letting the employees know that their health is our number one priority. That was never a mixed message. That was never overlooked. Kathleen said it earlier, every single meeting began with thanking everybody in the most sincere way from the bottom of our heart, calling people out that went above and that have gone above and beyond. And I think that is a caveat to what Marcus and Ryan are rolling out in their respective areas as a test for us all. And I think that jumps out in front of a lot of the maybe the objections that might be inherent to that stuff, letting everybody know through the whole journey here that there has been nothing more important than your and your family's health. And we couldn't be more appreciative of everything that you're all bringing to the table.
Yeah, Kathleen?
Well, yeah, and we've done it every banner and the same message across the entire company, hopefully, and partnered with HR. Hopefully that alleviated some of the things that our division had to do, hopefully. But yes, and we've partnered with several people on, the food safety, our cleaning protocols. We have a food safety, and that's our benefit, to be able to clean appropriately at store level. But hand in hand with HR, yeah, all across the company, and as Joe said, our employees were our number one asset. And without them, we couldn't have operated. So we didn't have employees calling off, leaving, especially the front line, not coming to work. They were all there, and I think it's a testament to the divisions on how they deployed that message. We might not have got all messages down to the rank and file, but I think that one we did.
So thinking about, we'll stay with technology, one more question, and then we'll move to Ryan. But thinking about technology, and we've talked a little bit about what was a helpful piece during the pandemic and what you're working on now. And I know this is unprepared question. You know I had to do it to you. Is there anybody that would offer to say, hey, if I had known, right? Now, of course, you're not you would have all bought stock in hand sanitizer and masks, and then we wouldn't even be here. But, thinking about things that you, from a technology perspective, of course, the thermal cameras and taking everyone's tip kind of came out of nowhere. But does anyone have anything that they would say, in prep for our audience, in preparation for a potential second wave, a potential new crisis? Is there anything that you guys would say, hey, this is something I'm looking at for maybe later? Anybody? Giving you a second to think. This is one of those bingo drink moments. Joe, you're off mute.
The electronic counters at the front of our stores now, not to the extent that Ryan and Marcus have them with thermo readers, but just the occupancy counters have been invaluable to us because we have the occupancy management portion of our business that without the technology takes people and it takes people open to close. You have the cleaning portion of the business that takes people. You have the alternate. We alternate the use of every other register about every hour in our banner. So that's all people in labor. And I'm preaching to the choir here. Our labor can make or break us, right? With the margins in which we operate, or that pool in which we all swim. So those things are so vitally important for the long-term sustainability of all of these things with integrity, right? So there's no corners to be cut when you put that occupancy counter at your front door, right? You can take and reallocate that asset to helping clean your front end diligently, because at the end of the day, the one thing that we've learned through this whole thing is how deep you're able to clean your store is a competitive advantage or disadvantage, right, at the end of the day. So assets reallocated to that are invaluable.
No, good points for sure. Okay. Any other comments on that one? Going once? Okay. So, all right, Ryan, this is your section here because, man, you've kind of had it going on over there in Seattle. I don't know what's happening over there, but so first it started with the epicenter of COVID. I think I heard was like a mile from your headquarters. So talk to us about that, right? I'm wondering if the intensity was more with that level of intense scrutiny from both the media as well as across the country, and kind of what learnings you can provide from both the pandemic perspective, really moving into social unrest and the CHOP or CHAZ or the autonomous zone you got going over there. So I don't even know how you're like, you probably lost like 50 pounds not sleeping at all, but tell us what's going on over there.
I didn't have 50 pounds to lose to begin with, but in Seattle, we like to be the trendsetters. So we started it off with good old COVID, as everybody's aware. And yes, the hot spot was just north of us. I'm here in Bellevue, Washington, and it was up just north of us here in Kirkland. And it was, I think the big thing with this, when you come into a pandemic, nobody knew what this was going to be. Nobody knew how this was going to shake out. And so you think about this, we don't know what we don't know. And so the number one thing that we looked at is, I think anybody that was watching the news saw what was starting to unfold in China and how fast that was developing. And so you start thinking, okay, that's going to hit Washington, hit Boston, hit wherever. What are we going to do to react? So I don't think anybody anticipated how quickly it was going to unfold, but absolutely the key partners here in our division started having those initial conversations well before the first positive case showed up in Kirkland. And just what do we do if they're talking about in China, this thing is taken off and they're having to build hospitals overnight and they're having to do this? What kind of reaction from the grocery perspective are we going to have to do to react accordingly? And, from the onset, if we have this show up in Washington, albeit we didn't expect to be the first, but you have those conversations internally. And the number one thing is here within our organization, we do have our crisis management teams, not only Kathleen alluded to with the corporate teams, but each division has their crisis management team. So within our division here, there's a total of 5 of us that sit on that committee. And we had some conversations surrounding what if this happens and what are we going to do from the different aspects. We have the store preparedness, we have the support preparedness, and then we have distribution. How are we going to get groceries to the stores? So it was more of a just kind of initial preparation of what are we going to do if we got to kick this thing into high gear. And obviously there's always IT infrastructure and power grids dropping and satellite phones that you always prepare for, like major weather preparedness stuff. But this was something in a whole new nature that we hadn't touched before. So that was really the only thing that took place at the onset. And then the news starts to percolate that we have 1 positive, we have 2 positives, we have 3, and within a couple of days, okay, here we go. This is starting to take off, and we're the first in the United States to get this. So that's when conversations really started kicking into high gear and talking about what are we going to do to have a fluid strategy to react to this in real time, and really start tracking what we're going to do to support the stores. And bottom line, like Joe said, keep everybody healthy and safe.
So knowing that you were the first and, a part of a larger banner, Kathleen and Joe and Marcus, was there any benefit to Ryan being thrown in the fire first? I mean, were you able to then glean kind of the other crisis things that he was able to start first and then help your other divisions, Kathleen?
Most definitely, from the corporate standpoint. I can remember our senior vice president of food safety wanted to buy a large quantity of this cleaning chemical. And should we do it? I don't know. What do you think? Who's going to pay for it if we don't need it? And now, in retrospect, obviously, we needed it. So we were able then to start on the back end, although I'll tell you the divisions are better at responding quickly, but on the back end, sourcing product, sourcing masks or hand sanitizer, or we didn't think about toilet paper, but
Who did?
seriously having to start there. And our IT, we ended up, we ended up closing all our corporate offices and sending people home. And a lot of our people didn't have laptops. So all that whole process began because of Ryan. So all those things that were going on behind the scenes. And we are fortunate having the crisis team in each division because they have a counterpart at corporate. So they could tell me what they're doing from Ryan's perspective, but then the food safety could do it to the food safety people. So that was our benefit. And then we could tell Joe what was going to happen in Philadelphia as they moved across the country.
Marcus?
Yeah, I just wanted to add a quick note. So my division's centrally located. So my counterparts, Joe and Ryan, everything starts on the East Coast, West Coast, and whether it's theft or in this situation, COVID. And so our division was probably the last to actually see the same type of things that they were dealing with 3 or 4 weeks in front of us. So we were watching to see how their customers were reacting, how they were, what they were buying and so forth. So we had that to help us, several weeks in advance.
Joe?
So yeah, first off, I couldn't have been happier for Ryan. I mean, it's really nice for Ryan to
Let's just have a cheers to Ryan.
Yeah,
I think we're all,
appreciate that, Joe.
everybody but Ryan was super happy for Ryan. No, and I have to say that there are a few others that I would have wanted to field this first, and I mean that in a good respect, in that Ryan's so plugged in, and we talked earlier about relationships, right? And the relationships Ryan has and had with his team as they sort of waded into these unknown waters, quickly translated to the relationships he has with all of us, Kathleen's team. So we were all super informed super early. And as we realized, or at least from my standpoint, as I realized, I was a little bit in front of this thing, right? With the information I was getting from Ryan and from Kathleen and from the team. I look across the hallway at my banner office and the exact same thing is happening in marketing. The exact same thing is happening in operations. And I think that's just a really super neat and special thing. And it tells, again, the story of those relationships and how important they are in such an event that we could never have begun to predict what we've navigated through up until now. But we've navigated it better because of the relationships that we had both in our department and outside of our department.
So let me ask you really quick too, when you think about the relationships piece, and not everybody is, Kathleen is trying to get her lights back on.
I thought she was joking.
Yeah. So thinking about those supermarkets and grocers and food service providers that aren't Safeway, right? That don't have the team and the infrastructure and the presence that you guys have. Say it's a regional grocer. How would you suggest that they tap into kind of the benefit you guys have for being so spread out and so huge? Is it that relationships piece to say, hey, if you're networking with, and you guys are always fantastic about information sharing and being involved in these CGA and FMI and all these great, fantastic groups. I mean, Kathleen, is that the suggestion that you would have to that regional chain that says, hey, that's all great, good for you, but I'm not that big? Most
definitely. Any one of us, and we do in LP for sure, share across the enterprise. Yeah, I would, that's what they need to do locally and then regionally. And I don't think you have to stay just with grocers. Obviously, I'd go out to other ones too, because I learned some really good ideas, got some really good ideas from a non-grocer. The coin issue that we're all dealing with now, not having coins because the mints aren't working. One of the divisions, one of the companies that talked about adding it to a loyalty program if the customer didn't want their change. So little tidbits by having those relationships. Doesn't have to be just grocers, doesn't have to be just food services, but we can learn something from everybody. Reach out.
Yeah, networking. It's a kind of a platitude, but unfortunately, it's actually legitimate. It really does save you on situations like this. Okay, back to you, Ryan. When you're talking about we have to get to CHOP, we have to. So we've had a session today on social unrest, but thinking about you guys had what 2 stores on the edge of the autonomous zone there in Seattle. Like what if you could give the audience your learnings and some quick, hey, if your community starts to set up an autonomous zone, here's what you need to do?
I would say there's several different factors that tie back into this. So obviously, we had our daily duties of COVID, and everything that we're doing in that. Then you mix in the social unrest dynamic, and it takes on a whole life of its own. I would say the biggest thing that we did initially as this, and I know all my counterparts would share this, is the inbound and outbound of communication and gathering of information, monitoring of not only real time what's going on in, at the store, around the store, in the community, but information was absolutely key in everything that we did, not only with with the CHOP Chaz autonomous zone here that was right next to our stores. But we had social unrest across our division. We had numerous stores that were impacted greatly and severely in areas you would never guess that we were going to have those situations. And I know counterparts out there, Joe and Marcus and others in the other divisions have the same issues. Monitoring of social media and really having your subject matter experts when it comes to all the different social media platforms. We had people monitoring Facebook, Instagram, live videos, Twitter. We even had a couple of people on our organized retail crime team were monitoring Snapchat and other ones because of the live streaming, the heat mapping of videos. We could see where hot spots were popping up. So really the day-to-day monitoring of social media and gathering of information, and then being able to do something with that information and turn it into actionable data to where do we need to escalate and increase resources in that area, or do we need to shut the store down? Do we need to board the windows up? And,
I was going to ask you. So you kept your stores open during this whole situation?
Yeah. So with that, there were several instances where we're talking specifically about that autonomous zone. Where we had to shut the stores down because the groups, until they really settled on that area, were very fluid and moved around the community. And, Seattle was no different than any of the other major metropolitan areas with the looting and the rioting and, fires being set to police cars and everything else. There were times we had to quickly react and shut a store down. We had to have that plan in place so that our stores weren't going to be caught off guard. So that when we made the decision, and it was real time, we had text strings going with our leadership. So all the way up to our division president, it was real time to where we made the decision, okay, these 3 stores, they're shutting down because we have a group of 2,000 that are moving north on Roosevelt, and we have to shut the store down. And we were able to either quickly shut the store down, board up, the store was prepared to react according. There were a couple of situations where we actually had to abandon the store and evacuate the employees. So really having your experts within, whether it be asset protection or operations, having your subject matter experts for social media and gathering of information so you can real time make those snap decisions to protect the infrastructure and your employees. That was number one, the thing that really saved our bacon in a lot of these situations. And fortunately we had, we have thousands of employees, and, nothing serious in nature about our customers or employees as far as being harmed. Obviously buildings can be repainted and fixed up, but I'll tell you, that's Amber, that was probably the biggest thing we took away from it, was just that information, and then being able to inbound, outbound, clearly communicate that out to the field, to your teams, to operations, and have those partnerships within the organization so that you know who you're turning to shut down stores or react. And then on the outside of that, what resources are you going to lean on, whether it be security resources or additional bodies on the ground. And then the other thing is law enforcement. Seattle Police Department, I'll tell you, they are a very large organization. We have a tremendous relationship with them. But even with that relationship, it was made very clear that in these areas, especially around the CHOP and the CHAZ, we're going to have to go it alone, and we're going to have to be prepared to handle different situations and crises by ourselves, because they simply cannot and will not respond to certain areas. So
was that ever in your plan? I mean, like the sub, if police can't and won't help you, I mean, because they can't, I mean, was that ever even thought of?
I think full transparency, no, you would never ideally think of a situation where law enforcement, with all of our great partnerships, is not going to want to respond. I think it was a great eye opener for us, to where we have, in talking with the different precinct captains and whatnot, we had one-on-one conversations, and they were very honest. They said, "Hey, we're going to deploy as many assets to your stores as possible and keep those partnerships going." But the reality is, where the CHOP and the CHAZ were, they had to completely abandon the Seattle Police East Precinct. And because of that, they weren't going to have Seattle Police anywhere near that area. So our stores just in the neighboring areas, we're kind of on our own there. Unfortunately, again, with our relationship with Seattle PD, we offered one of our stores as a staging location. So we had a very heavy presence at one of the stores, where we had 100, 150 cops staging there at different times of the day. So
that's smart.
That helped us tremendously. Free coffee and sandwiches for those in blue was a good solution there as well. But I don't think anybody sits there and builds into their plan, okay, so when law enforcement doesn't pick up the phone, what do we do? You have to be able to react quickly and jump on that.
And the other thing I'd say too, in the grocery industry, for the most part, we're not used to having to close our stores and have looters present. I mean, I know that occurs in some of the other, the Gap or the other store companies. So this isn't a normal everyday thing for us. So as it started, it was a little bit shocking. Now we're pretty good at responding to it, but initially we had several stores overrun, and it was new. And now what do we do? And now how do we protect them? And that, as Ryan was talking about, having the real-time social media intelligence is critical.
So we only have a few minutes left here, but I want to throw it to Ryan real quick. And this, of course, is an unprepared question. But so if you had, looking at, the police, challenge to respond, and then having to shut down your store so quickly, is there anything, and I could throw this to Joe and Marcus too, but is there anything that you would say, okay, we learned this and I would do this much differently, just for our audience to say, okay, is that in my plan? Is there a takeaway there? Things that were either surprising or you said, dang, we should have put that in the plan, or we're going to moving forward?
I will tell you, knock on wood, hopefully we come out of this in future incidents like we did with this one. It all boils back again to preparation and resource identification, knowing who your partners are, having those when it comes down to like boarding up a store. How quickly can you board up a store, and who is it that's going to do that for you in the time of crisis? We had one particular location in Bellevue where we had a very large protest and pretty violent situation pop up with hundreds and hundreds of National Guard and State Patrol and everything. and it was literally on the corner of our store. So how quickly can we get people to board up the store and protect the store? We already had all those individuals identified. They were ready to go. And they were out there within 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and boarding the store up. So resource allocation, knowing who your partners are, whether it be within your own organization, so you can quickly and fluidly move through the situation, and having those resource partners, whether it be off-duty police, security, somebody to board up the store, somebody to repair windows.
Because that's like third-party people, right? I mean, that you could call.
I mean,
okay, we need the boards and the screwdrivers, right?
Yeah, and who's going to want to go into, to truly be that valued partner, to go into an area of crisis? And we had those. We had individuals that said, yeah, we'll go board those windows up, and they were marching through, the individuals with tear gas and hanging boards and doing everything else. So resource identification, who are your partners inside and outside of your organization, and having that true crisis management plan, and really trying to button down playing the what if game. And we do that within all of our divisions, where we have mock scenarios. We had run one about 3 months prior to this with our entire senior leadership team here, where we had 40, 50 people going through a crisis management mock scenario in a boardroom. And the email communication, the texting, and all the automation there. It's preparedness is the number one key for any of these situations, whether it be COVID, whether it be social unrest, and not wait until the 11th hour to decide, okay, we got a problem. What are we going to do? And again, we don't know what we don't know. We're never going to be 100% ready to go, but you have to be prepared and know who your partners and people are.
Which is why people are watching us today. So thank you guys again. I really appreciate it. Our audience was hoping you weren't so quick on the mute button, I think, but now we're potentially headed to happy hour. So again, thank you guys so much for your time today. And now back to Apex regularly scheduled program. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
That was an awesome session with the Safeway Albertson team. Thanks,
Amazing.
guys.
Thank you.
Super cool.
Yeah, that was really good.
Welcome back. You have made it to the final live Q&A here in our live Talk LP studio, coming to you from Nash Vegas, because it's happy hour. So we're going to bring in our panelists. What's up, guys?
Hey, everybody.
Hey, Amber.
Hey, you guys have been hanging out, man.
Good afternoon.
We can't thank you enough for basically all this time commitment that you have given to Apex.
Yeah.
So thank you
Unbelievable.
so much. We know
you.
our audience appreciates it,
Yeah.
for sure.
Thank you very much.
Let's see if anyone's sober enough to answer these live questions. Huh?
All right.
Okay. Craig's got the first one.
Yeah, well, this is a toss-up. Thermal imaging and infrared temperature screening technologies are permeating the market. How important do you believe these technologies will turn out to be in the long run?
Yeah, so I'll take that. That's a great question. Here at Albertsons Safeway, we feel that that's going to be the new expectation post-COVID at facilities like your distribution centers, your manufacturing plants, and not really just focused on COVID specifically, but all infectious diseases like strep and the flu. Keeping that vital part of the workforce healthy and safe, that's a critical to our success in the stores.
Okay, so this question is over to Joe Conway. Our push-out thefts have dramatically increased as well. We are considering shopping cart technology to address our increase in push-out thefts. What should be considered when determining the return on investment? What do you got, buddy?
Well, I think it's great technology, obviously, right? So when we started dipping our toes in that water, it was with the gatekeeper system, and we did intense evaluations in 2 stores that were in college areas. Funny enough, right? I don't know if there's a connection there, but there was in the 2 stores that we noticed that we had a problem in. And we did some very intense forensic video reviews of our of our front ends over the course of a period of time on certain targeted days, and we found the pushouts were significant. And putting what the losses we pegged against the cost of the system, it was one of those no-brainers. It was just, in those 2 stores, it was a no-brainer. So we started to deploy that, and this was years ago. We started to deploy that approach in other stores where front-end folks were experiencing what they thought was just spotty issues of attempted and successful rollouts. And our intense, labor-intensive forensic reviews brought us to the conclusion that this is the type of technology that would help with us. And I think as front ends open up more to frictionless solutions and self-checkout and things like that, or less friction solutions, those technologies play a bigger role. I think one of the challenges with them is they solve a problem and they'll lay dormant for a short amount of time. So they kind of go on a little bit of a roller coaster ride, at least in our experience, where the store port that comes with the system we have comes with a store port app. So you get an alert when the system is alerted, and you have a video clip that's involved with that. A lot of people know about that. Those who don't, super slick. And when you get an alert, you're able to evaluate whether it's a true attempted or successful pushout, or whether it's something else that has triggered the system. So in reviewing those, it goes on a roller coaster. So the element that exploits that attempts cart pushouts, will identify that we have that system in there, and they'll go dormant for a while. We're off their watch list or their attempt list. And then all of a sudden, it'll seem like there's another sort of resurgence of attempts of those. The videos are hilarious. And the systems are really, really effective that we've installed. And again, it's not something we install in every store. It's a surgical implementation for us, but it's been very successful where we have deployed it.
For the comedic value alone, is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
Make great Christmas party videos, don't they? Yeah, I would add to that too, as we're looking at ROIs. I mean, I've spent the last 20 years working on this type of technology, and thank you, Joe. As a lot of the social unrest and a lot of the challenges that Mike and Larry talked about, I think it's appropriate, to also consider moving forward that these technologies really look at the behavior and not the person, and call out the behavior specifically. And I think moving forward, that's something that needs to be a consideration as well.
All right, so we've got a question for you, Kathleen. Onboarding new hires so quickly means training has to be compromised. If you had to change anything about onboarding new associates, what would it be?
Well, I think the training needs to be continual. So that is a learning for us. You onboard them, you train them, and then you have to follow that up with continual training, whether it be in a huddle in the store, whether it be in a poster in the break room. It has to be continually reinforced. That's the only way it's going to be successful. And we've seen that. We saw that issue. So you can't just hire them, onboard them, give them a training video, and send them on their way. We know we have to continually reinforce it.
Yeah, some good points there. So Ryan, I think we all really curious. I know Craig is a West Coaster here, but if they don't know, you're out in Seattle, right? You have nothing going on in Seattle. Have you slept any? I mean, what's going on out there? We need an update on the autonomous zone out there. Can you give us an update on what's going on in Seattle and how you have really tackled that and actually been able to, I don't know, see your family or go to sleep once in a while?
Sleep's overrated.
Yeah.
So the autonomous zone is no more. Just before the 4th of July, there was a push by Seattle police and the city to dismantle the autonomous zone because there was some impending conflict that was going to potentially come downhill on the 4th of July. So the city worked to dismantle it. There was not too many issues when they took it down, but there's still a lot of active protesting, which is fine. It's the social unrest and the violence are the ones that we're kind of keeping an eye on. But it's, I think now we're starting to see a lot of this percolate up to other cities across the U.S. I know Portland's got a lot of opportunities, and there's several others, not only within our organization, but also across the U.S. from other companies that are starting to see similar activity. And some people get some wise ideas that we could start our own autonomous zone in Arizona or Portland. So it's fortunately, I think there are a lot of lessons learned, not only from retail, but also from city leaders across the U.S. on how to do things, how not to do things, and hopefully not repeat similar mistakes.
So thinking about the crisis plan, right? And I'm sure that you guys, because I know you have several stores near that zone, I'm sure you had, just in case an autonomous zone pops up in your crisis plan. But we addressed this a lot in the panel. But, from a live kind of takeaway for our audience perspective, is there anything that you would change, thinking about this autonomous zone popping up, or, social unrest, and then the continuing violence in the streets of Seattle as we're still seeing? Like, is there anything that you guys have to pivot continuously that you would say, hey guys, be on the lookout for this?
I think a lot of you use the word pivot. That's the number one word in any kind of these situations, is being able to be fluid, react quickly. As far as changing anything, I said it earlier. I think we all all of our divisions came out rather unscathed. A few issues here and there, but there aren't too many things we would do differently. I think there are some areas that we would highlight and maybe accentuate a little bit. As far as our focus and our real-time communication with city leaders and police departments. Even though they communicate, they may not be able to react or respond to a particular crisis. Having those individuals identified within the city so that you can really get the true updates as to what's going on. Not that we would do it differently. I think we would just pay a little bit more focus to getting the daily updates on, because they're reacting the same way we are. They're trying to pivot. They're trying to, manage the crisis from a city perspective, and really having that plug-in with the city leaders, the city council, as well as the police departments. That's one area that we learned it was very high importance, and really trying to make sure we stay as engaged as possible on that front.
All good points.
Yeah, very good.
Well, look, we really appreciate you guys. I know this has been a huge time commitment. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with the Apex audience. Man, you guys are awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your partnership. Thank you for participating. Good to see you all.
And
day,
we
Amber.
have a
Thanks
shout
for
out.
having
Thank you to all the sponsors all day long, because without them, we couldn't do what we do. So we appreciate all of the continual support from, even if we don't buy something from you, you continue to support the industry. It's very seriously mean that. So take care. And Amber, I just want you to see, I'm inviting you and David to my backyard.
Yeah,
All
we
right.
finally got to see your backyard.
Yeah,
That's
personally.
awesome. We'll be
There
there.
you go.
Count us
All
in.
right.
Thanks you guys. We appreciate it. All right, so we have made it to the end
Oh my
of our
goodness.
first Asset Protection Executive Exchange. Thank you for hosting with me.
Thank
give
you
us
for
the
having
elbow
me.
Bump
It was
all
a
the
pleasure.
way from California.
Pleasure working with a real pro.
Oh, well, stop it. Stop. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We have to thank one more time our sponsors, Gatekeeper Systems, Athos Group, March Networks, InstaKey, Sensormatic, 3SI, and Navco. You guys are awesome. So stay tuned for more Apex events coming your way, and we appreciate you tuning in to our jam-packed afternoon of content. Thanks, guys. Keep it safe out there.